How do you build an effective train network in Factorio? And why would you even bother in the first place? That's our subject for this session. It's really a big topic that separates players quite a bit. There are many advanced and intricate things you can accomplish with trains. I highly recommend using them, but quite a few players have gotten frustrated and confused and just said, I'm not going to bother with that. I'm just going to stick with my transport belts. You absolutely can finish the game that way, but it's very useful to use trains, so I'm going to try to demystify them here some. The reason that we want them is that they're by far the best way of transporting high volume materials over a long distance. So as we push out more and find in remote areas oil that we want, or iron or copper, whatever it is, we're going to want to use trains to transport that back to our factory. The first and most basic element is just the rail. This is essentially the transport belt, if you will, of the train network. So R to rotate, we can use diagonals. We can just click and run along and place it like we would a transport belt. Or we can split off from this at any point. So that's what these arrows are for, telling us which direction we're going to go. Down that way, or maybe up this way. Notice the nice curves we're getting. Or we can do it forward the other direction. And then we can also extend it just off the end here. So instead of just constantly clicking, we can just go a decent distance at a time, like so. And there's also the ghost placing with shift. And we can go quite long distances this way, curl around whatever we may wish to do. Now that's much more useful later when we get into having robots that can build for us, but it is still quite a benefit to know that it is there as a possibility. So we have this nice long stretch of track. Let's put a train on it, starting with a locomotive, which has to be put on the track. It cannot be put anywhere else. And we have R to switch it back and forth, whichever direction we want it to face. And then it's got the need for fuel, so we'll go ahead and put some of that in. And we have this whole schedule area. This is for orders. We want to turn it to automatic. We can change the color if we want. But this we will get into more later as we get into more advanced elements of the network. So the fuel, we have 3 different stacks it can carry, quite a bit of fuel at a time. And then it is also noted here on our mini-map where it is in relation to the rest of our factory. Then, for this locomotive to really be of any use to us, it needs to carry various items around. We have 2 wagons that we can do that with. First is just your regular cargo wagon. Has 40 stacks of capacity, which is between the amount of an iron and a steel chest. And then if I wanted to, I can put my solar panels in there, or maybe I want to put some electric poles or whatever, and then it can be pulled around by the locomotive. The second one, the fluid wagon, is much more recent addition to the game, late in the alpha development period, and this carries our liquids or gases around, and it's got the same capacity as a storage tank, 25,000. Now before they had this, everybody used barrels, which are still in the game, but they're largely a legacy item. Very limited actual practical uses for them now. But what you would do is you would have to put your liquid or gas with an assembly machine into barrels, and then you would load those barrels into the cargo wagon because it was the only kind available. Fluid wagons, much more easy to use. Now this train, as it sits now, we could just hop in it and operate it like we would a car. So W to go forward, S to go backwards. The directional left and right keys would tell it which direction to go if we had a split off. But at a certain point, you're going to kind of get sick of being on a joyride. You're going to want to accomplish other things in your factory, but still have the train moving around and delivering and picking up the materials that you need. So at that point, we have to start automating, beginning with a train stop, which does exactly what it says on the tin. These little green squares are telling us where we can place it, and it must be placed on the right side of the track in the direction the train is traveling. So for our train, we're going to want to have it on the bottom here. Could be on the top. Notice the arrows and also the white brackets are guides for where your cars are going to line up when the train stops here. And that means that you're going to know where you're going to want to load and unload materials and have your equipment in place for those. So we'll just put it here for now. And we can select our train stop, which is given a random name, Rocks in this case, and say we only wanted so many trains to come here at once. There are various reasons you might want to do that. We can enable the train limit, just put a number in there. It's showing the trains to this stop. Obviously, there are none down here yet. We will get to all of this later. But it's worth noting that now that we have a train stop, we could add that to our schedule if we felt like it. Then at a certain point, you're going to continue adding more and more trains to your network. It's going to be going more and more different places. We need a way to tell the trains where to go and when beyond just the train stops. Like if we had a couple trains coming to this direction, or if you have intersections, you don't want trains crashing into each other. And you want them to be in the right place at the right time with coordinated movement. And that's when we get into signals. The purpose of signals is to divide this whole train network into blocks. So for example, you can see it says trains in block 1 there on the right, and it's going to say that no matter where we go on the rail because we haven't divided it at all yet. Blocks just means a section of the track that is divided from others. So if we take our signal and put it right here behind the train, it says red. And by the way, these need to be in the same direction of travel, because if I put it up here, then this signal is talking about travel this way. It needs to be on the right side, just like the train stop, in the direction of travel. So now, there are no trains in this block, but there are in this block, because it has them separated. We're going to place it one more time, and notice that when we place it, see the purple on the left and the aqua on the right. That's giving us a visual indicator of the division. Now normally, we want to have enough room between signals for an entire train, however long we're making them, to fit. But I'm going to put them closer just for the purposes of demonstration. We put another rail signal here. We got that small purple section, and now this over here is a third block. Then, let's try the rail change signal. And what this does is it looks ahead, not just to its own block, but to the signal in front of it. So this is not going to give the all clear green unless not only this area, but also this area is clear of trains. And you can put many of them back to back, which is hence the name chain. Like I could have 5 rail chain signals in a row, but they would all be showing the same symbol because they're just looking ahead to the next one until we reach a break where we have a regular signal. So if we get in our train and let's move around and see what happens. Watch the different changing. See, now we went back here, that's red, and if we go all the way back behind it, okay, this one's turned green now, this one's turned green, but that one's still red because there's something in its block. Okay, so now it's green. And that one turns red until we get past this one. Okay, that one's red. And then as we pull forward, this is still red, and so therefore this one is still red, even though the block ahead of it is clear. Let's look at some more practical applications of this. A crucial decision that we need to make pretty early on is, do we want a single or a dual track approach? Now here's an example of a dual track. We have got a locomotive on this rail that's simply only going to go east, and then we will put one on the north side, and that's only going to go west. And then if it needs to come back east, then it will simply swing around, but we have one direction per track. Now that's more space for the second track, obviously, and it also is going to require the extra material for the second track. But the single track approach is going to bring problems of its own. One is that while you can do it if you're driving them manually, automated locomotives do not back up. They only go in the direction they're pointing. So if we want this train to be able to go back to the west on this single track, then I have to throw another locomotive on the other end of it. And then it will pull it in this direction. But then no matter which way it's going, we have one locomotive, which is just a bunch of dead weight, slowing down the rest of the train and taking up space. Another issue that we'll run into with a single track approach is we want to add more trains, but they can't get by each other if we need to do that, and we'll eventually will for additional throughput. So we would have to add bypasses, or what's effectively a brief area of dual track. Like so. We'll just curve off to the side here and go over about as far as we think we need to, and then curve back and rejoin. And then we would just put a locomotive on here. It's waiting for this one to go by, and then it can proceed on its merry way. And as the game progresses, we would need to add more and more of these bypasses. And ultimately, I don't think it's worth the hassle. I think it's a lot easier to deal with the dual track approach. Just put in that investment up front to get the tracks going both ways, and you'll make your life much, much easier. But both of them are viable. Another thing to consider with a single track is signaling. So if we had, for example, a signal here, notice that all of a sudden, I cannot put additional signals on the bottom side except right where that one is. You can put them across from each other, so you have signaling in each direction, but I can't have a signal on this side of the track and then put one just like right here. Whereas on the top, where the signals already are, I can put them wherever. So if you're doing a single track approach, just keep in mind, you have to have your signals opposite each other. Another aspect is spacing of the tracks. Notice that if you look at where the signal areas are, we have plenty of room in here for us to be able to put signals on either side, and we know exactly where they're going to be going. But if we were to put the tracks much closer together, like so, then all of a sudden there's no room for the signals. So make sure your tracks are spread out plenty far. And that can also be trouble with these merging and joining areas. For example, if I put a signal right here, well, you can see by the indicators on the track that it's governing this one. But this signal actually won't say anything about this track going this way, even if I wanted it to. I would have to, for example, put a signal here and then here. So you have to be careful with these joining areas as well, because you can end up putting a signal somewhere and you meant it to be on the other track, but it's going to put itself in this location. Any train network that's large enough to be very useful is going to, by necessity, have train lines crossing and intersecting. And we need to be able to handle that and get the flow right without having log jams and collisions and all other matters of chaos. So this is a very simple example, a small roundabout, and we've got lines going in and out from each of the 4 cardinal directions. So how are we going to handle the flow of traffic here? Good rule of thumb to use. It's not always the best way, but it's definitely something I would recommend starting with as you're learning train networks, is chain in, rail out. What we mean by that is we have a chain signal as we're approaching the intersection and a rail signal as we're leaving it. So if we set that up over here, say they're coming in on this line, and then it will be coming in over here, and over here, and over here. So that's our chain signals. And then we need the rail ones on the way out. So here, and here, and here, and here. And the point of all this is, if we have a train approaching, it is not going to enter the intersection unless it can also leave it. So here, it's got everything green because there's nothing inside. But let's say we have a train that's way over here, and it's making its way around, and it could be going anywhere. Well, all of a sudden, all of our chain signals, they have gone red, and they will stay red until this leaves the roundabout, and then the next train can make its way in. Now, this is not a particularly fast method, because it might have to wait for a train to go most of the way around the roundabout, and again, there's only going to be one in here at a time, but it will avoid any bad collisions and any huge problems of congestion. For the amount of traffic that we're going to be needing for this game, this type of intersection would work fine. You're building bigger and bigger, you're going to want to have more intricate signaling and a lot more complex intersections to make it work for you. This is the first train stop that I'm actually going to use. We'll look at the fluid first, and then we'll get to how to handle it if you're not having fluids on your train. But we have pump jacks on each of our starting oil wells. Notice the 24.4 per second expected resources there on the right. Pump jacks will gradually decline how much they're going to produce over time, but they will always have a minimum level. Oil is effectively infinite, slows down to a trickle, but never runs out completely. The minimum level is the higher of either 2 per second or 20% of the initial level. So this one will never go down nearly as low as 2. But you're always going to get that basic amount, and we can get some supply oil out of here for the rest of the game. Then pipes hooked up to our storage tanks. I have 4 so that I have twice the amount that I'm going to be putting on my train, and you can absolutely get away with the scale of factory you're going to be building with just 1 fluid wagon. But I'm going with 2. Obviously, the fewer wagons that you have on your train, then the more trains you have to put out there. And also having 2 here helps us illustrate a couple points. So you need pumps to load the fluid wagons, and I'm just going to reverse these. Take it all out for the moment so that we can see how this works, because fluid flow and dynamics is kind of strange in Factorio, and it's never worked exactly like you might expect it to without a little help. So it's trying to equalize the amount in each of these storage tanks. It's going to want to even them out as opposed to filling one completely before it goes into another. But then if we turn these pumps on, they're not going to work at the same rate, even though you'd expect them to try to equalize. See this one here? Okay, 1100 and declining per second. This is a lot less. And that gap's going to get worse. And there are ways around this, but they're fairly complicated, and they deal with aspects of the game we haven't gotten into yet. But for our scale of factory, we really don't need to worry about it. We just know that, okay, this one's going to fill up, and then this one is going to now get a lot more power than it had before. And also notice that the fuller these storage tanks are, the faster the pump's going to be able to work, the more oil it's going to get, because its pumping speed is still going down because the amount of oil in the storage tanks is going down. But it will eventually fill, and we will be all set with that. And our station is now fully working. And then, of course, after the train takes off, then the pump jacks will continue to try to fill these back up, and the cycle continues. Turning our attention to loading solid items then, whether it's iron ore, copper ore, whatever we want to put on our train. This is the standard, and in fact, from what I've seen, virtually universally recommended setup for doing that. I think it's actually quite over-engineered, but we will get to why I think that is, and sort of understand what does this approach come from, what's the thought behind it. So, our cargo wagons, they're basically just glorified chests, as we've noticed. So, we want to use inserters to load them. And if you think, well, I want to load these as fast as possible so I'm super efficient in getting my trains around, then you would want a max set of inserters in front of them. And then if you thought, well, let's just throw a transport belt here. The problem we're going to have with this is, A, the inserters are going to grab faster than this can bring in items, even if it's a blue express belt. And we're going to be using actually not the fast inserters here, but our stack inserters. We just can't build them yet, so I just have the blue fast ones as a stand-in. The other part is, wherever the belt's coming from, like, these inserters down here are going to get all the action, and these aren't going to be working, and that's going to slow us down as well. So that's the idea behind having these chests, and it's a very good idea. We want a buffer in place so that we can just grab things as quickly as possible, and then of course we need another row of inserters here to fill that buffer. And the whole point of this contraption, it's a 1-to-6 balancer, is to evenly distribute between all of these so that each chest is going to have the same amount, assuming they aren't all full, and then we can get the fastest transition we can get. Now, this looks a little convoluted. It's not actually that bad, but also I think it's really important not to view situations like this as a black box. If you want to use this setup, you should understand how it works. If you don't want to use this setup, it's still helpful to understand how it works, because then you can engineer your own solutions with more knowledge. So the basics on this is you have some amount of material coming in on this belt, and then this splitter is going to split it in half. So half of it's going to go down here, and that half is going to be split again. There's going to be 1/4 then going here, and 1/4 going here, and then each of these splitters split it again. So you have each of these 4 spots, you have 1/8 of the original amount. Okay, then our second half went over this way, and that's going to be split again. So 1/4 goes over here into this, and splitting it again into 8ths. So we have 6 different locations, each getting 1/8 of the original amount. And then the final quarter, because we had half going over here, and this split into quarters, this quarter loops back around and starts the process again. Because 6 is not a power of 2, so you can't evenly divide all of it immediately, but we just have this small loop around, and it starts again. And that's the basic principle between trying to balance 1 to however many is, whatever amount you can't use initially, you just loop it back around, send it back through, and all of that works well for what it's meant to achieve. So I have a couple of issues here. One is, if we imagine then our current tech levels for the stack inserters, with 6 of them here, we would be able to load a cargo wagon in 36 seconds approximately. And actually, over time, we're going to triple that rate as we get more and more large stacks that they can transport. So we're actually going to get that down to about 12 seconds. Now that is super, super fast and many, many times faster than any standard factory is going to need. If you want a mega factory, yes, I understand you want to fully optimize everything. This might be the way to go. But for the volume of material that we're going to be moving, we do not need anything that large. The second part here is the buffer. Each one of these steel chests holds more material than the train. 48 in each and 40 in here. Why do I need something that's literally more than 7 times the buffer? Having a larger buffer doesn't actually help you, because you might say, well, what if I have trains coming constantly in? It doesn't matter, because you cannot, over time, over an extended period of time, you cannot have more material leaving than you have coming in. So there's no purpose in having a buffer that's a great deal larger than what a train can carry. It doesn't accomplish anything in the grand long-term scheme. And so instead of having something convoluted like this, my thought process is, well, why not just dump it down to 4? Because 4 is a power of 2. And the other part is, why have these big chests? You can even use wood here. If we have 4 wood chests here, we still have like a 60% buffer on top of what a train can be filled. But I'm just going to use iron. I'm going to assume you don't have any wood. And this is still, put these together. This is going to be 3 times plus what is in a cargo wagon. So that is way more than enough. And then if we put an additional set of inserters out here, and then we can break this down much more simply. Splitter, 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 and we're done. It comes in, splits into half. Each of these halves splits into a quarter. We load, we're on our way. Now, as far as the loading speed itself is concerned, even at our current level, instead of 36 seconds, it is going to take 54 seconds. So we're losing 18 seconds. But the time travel that we're going to have round trip for a train, pick up products, unload them, come back, 18 seconds is very small in comparison to that. And again, that's now. By the end of the game, we're going to be looking at 6 seconds. And then some people will say, well, I'm actually not even satisfied with this. I'm going to load on the other side as well. I'm going to set identical setup on this side also, and we're going to load the cargo wagons that way. Then it'd be down to 3 seconds. And just given the scale of our factory that we're going to need, it's just simply way more work and way more material than you need. The other reason to go with smaller chests, obviously, is simply that they're cheaper. Even going with the iron, which again is overkill, we have a fifth of the cost of the same amount of steel chests, and of course, it's even better than that because I'm only using 4 instead of 6. And is this a lot of material? No, but do I want to spend 8 iron or 8 steel? Why spend a bunch of extra that I don't need to set it up? So this is my recommended way of doing this, unless you want to build massive, in which case, go for it. Still need to give orders to our train and all of that, but the layout, the physical rails for our circuit, picking up oil, delivering up here, coming back down is all in place. And this is very long, much longer than I normally do for my first train line. But I have some reasons for doing it that way. One is that a lot of this is simply going to be reused. We're going to be getting more oil from down here, and they can just rejoin this. I don't want to have them go up around this way through all of these trees. Another one is, for example, if I just tried to pull it up here this direction and pipe it up, well, I didn't want to get too congested with all of my smelting here and my gear wheels and electronic circuits. I kind of wanted to leave that area free for all of those activities. Over in this area, we're going to eventually have our ore unloading stations. And so, combine all that together, I just decided, you know what, we're just going to take the time and set all this up. Now, this is almost 2,500 rails long. That's several thousand iron. But, going forward then, we are really set up for the future. I think a front-end effort versus a do-it-the-cheap, quick way is really beneficial. And I also like being fairly organic with my setups, meaning like, for example, down here, I kind of like this area, it's kind of interesting, but I have a very narrow area around this cliff, and so I just sent the other line around this way and it splits. Now, if you like everything super neat and tidy and grid-like, that might bother you, but I sort of like just going with the lay of the land on that. And of course, the other areas, it's much more narrow. I could actually put these a little bit closer together, but we have plenty of spacing in between them. Now, as for our unloading station itself, it's basically the inverse of the loading area. We have pumps, simply going to take the oil off of the train and put them in these storage tanks, again 4, and then they're going to pipe it off as needed. And then of course we have right here just bringing down the coal for the fuel for the locomotive so that it will reload with fuel every time it stops by to deliver. And I very much like putting the fuel on the unloading station because we're going to load from various places around the map, but every time it comes back to deliver oil or another train comes to deliver oil from somewhere else, we are going to be able to get it resupplied here. Preparations are almost complete. We will be getting our train in action shortly, but before we do that, I just want to do a quick little demo of how I would go about unloading if we were doing ore at this particular location. So it's pretty much just the inverse of what we were doing on the other side to load it. We've got our inserters taking it off, buffer so they can do it as quickly as is possible, more inserters to put it onto a belt, and then we'll use some splitters, condense it down into one, and we are ready to just go send it off to wherever. Now I like to go with 4 cargo wagons per train of that, so that would give us 4 belts coming out. Now I could get 4 belts out of 3 cargo wagons if I really wanted to, but that's a bunch of belt gymnastics that I don't think it's worth it to just add the other wagon on there. It's a nice even number. It's the most popular length of train for delivering cargo, and more than enough for the size of factory that we're going to have. Now, if you want to add longer trains, then what you want to do is add more locomotives at the front, because if you get more than 4 wagons, the math is complicated, but that's the general point at which you're going to want to add another locomotive to pull it and get a reasonable amount of acceleration and speed. So we're going to adjust our train stops here. I just want to name them something descriptive. You can also be more creative if you want, up to your particular personality. I'm just going to enter this as oil delivery so that I know this is the stop for all of our oil to be brought throughout the course of the game. We'll get rid of all this that we don't need. And then we'll go over to our other train stop, which of course is over here. So we're going to call this one simply starting oil pickup. And that's going to let us know this is this small area that we just began with. And if we want to select the train then to give it orders, we can just click on it directly, or we can hit the trains button. And we only have one available, says it's manually stopped. And it's very nice to be able to add orders to these remotely. This is a very powerful and flexible system. If we just hit add station, which place we want to go, we want to pick up oil first, and then we have conditions for it to meet before it leaves. It's basically telling it how long to stay there. So we could just do full cargo, and most of the time that's all you're going to need. Just fill up, go somewhere else, empty, and come back. After this, we're going to go to our oil delivery area, and then empty the cargo, and then when it reaches the bottom of whatever list you make, you could have 10 items on here if you wanted, as many stops as you want to make. It just goes back to the top. So all of that will work very well for us, but we can also add additional conditions and combine them. So for example, let's say this was not producing a whole lot, and I just wanted to go there every once in a while and then just pick up whatever is available, but not wait forever and then just move on to the next stop. So to do that, we could do something like time passed, and we could use any of these, but we're just going to use this as an example because I'll probably use this later on in the game once our supply starts going down. Well, we could say it's full, or it's waited here for a set amount of time, 30 seconds, a minute, whatever you might want that to be, and then at the end of that 30 seconds, then it would automatically leave. Now, if you did some different sort of conditions where you wanted them both to be met, then you just click this, and it's not an or condition, it's an and condition. So there is a great variety that you can do here, but mostly just fill it and then empty it where you go drop it off is going to be more than sufficient. So we'll just set this to automatic, which is going to make it attempt to go on its journey. You can see the path outlined there in red, and away it goes. Our train is moving by itself. And we'll just follow it here on the mini-map. Now, this is quite a long journey. If you plot a journey with a train that is more than a kilometer, which this is, then you get an achievement known as Factorio Express. And it's making its way around and coming in soon to where we are. And we're just going to hop on board and go for a ride. It will not be here very long. When these tanks are empty, it's going to unload quickly. That was fun. Away we go. And the top speed, 259 kilometers. If we sort of hover over this, we can see that it is speeding up, approaching 200 now. $220. And once we start getting close to our destination, it will slow down. But it's kind of cool to just ride along and, you know, see the countryside zooming by. And now we're going to start braking. And you can upgrade your braking speed later with advanced technology so that you can even maintain top speed for longer. Now, we will also have advanced fuel types as we're just filling this back up. Won't take long. These are pretty full. But advanced fuel types will increase your train's acceleration and top speed. They also do that for other vehicles that you put them in, but they're by far the most useful, I think, on the trains. And so that will help our performance as well. We'll be getting into those as they come along. Back, we're going to go the other direction then. And so you can see as it goes along, if you watch the fuel, it's going to consume, to take this entire round-trip journey, it's going to consume several coal, but not that much. The fuel doesn't go by super fast in these. And again, we're nearing the top speed that we can achieve. And we're braking. We're back at our drop-off, and then once these are emptied, we are going to have completely full storage tanks. Now I want to look at the signaling really quick here as well. We have a signal here in front, and a signal here in back, and this is just here so if there's another train on the track, it can come over here, and it can be ready to go into this station. But once it leaves this one, it's going to go almost all the way to down here. There are no signals in between. And as we develop our train network more and we have various intersections, different places, we're definitely going to want to add more signals so that it's not going that whole distance in one go. We don't have to worry about it now because we only have the one train. But as you move forward, you want to make sure you're signaling it appropriately so that your trains can move quickly to the next place they want to be, and you don't have these big, huge stretches where they're moving inefficiently. So when we return, we're going to be getting into the very large topic of oil production. What are we going to do with this oil now that we've transported it back to our factory? That's probably the single biggest obstacle for players that learn the game. The complexity goes up a fair amount compared to what we've done before, and we're really going to break that down and try to make it much easier to handle. Looking forward to that. Thanks for watching.